Economia partidei, Delgado acolo este, va fi corner, dragi ascultători.
No, 96. Okay, great. All right, we're going. You ready?
I am.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, checking the facts. If you're lost and you look, then you will find me. Time after time. Hello, everybody. Welcome to It Ain't Break. We had a little holiday. We've been busy. We've been doing some stuff, so there's been a hiatus, right high up in your hiatus. But we're back, and based on a whim, because I whimsically just chucked on Mars Attacks the other night, and I remembered what an interesting movie that was, and I just wanted to talk to you about it, and you seemed rather game for that, for said discussion.
Indeed.
So here we are, Mars Attacks, Tim Burton's 1996 film Mars Attacks. I have mixed feelings about Tim Burton. This is one of the ones I like. He's more miss than hit for me. I do find him rather overhyped. I like this one. I like Ed Wood. I do like Edward Scissorhands, and I'd say maybe Beetlejuice to varying degrees, but I think Ed Wood and this are Tim Burton's best films, in my view. What say you, Duncan Casey?
I generally, I suppose I have a soft spot for Tim Burton. I did meet him. He directed me in...
of course. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So I guess I'm a little biased.
Lol.
In Dark Shadows. I swore. Didn't swear. I don't think they'll pick that
I think we're past that,
think
man. The whole swearing thing hasn't panned out, has it, really?
It's hit and miss. Yes, so Dark Shadows. I think he's one of those directors. I suppose he's not to draw as a false comparison, I know in a lot of ways, but in the same sort of way that John Carpenter kind of swings for the fences and doesn't always hit it. I think Burton does that, and he makes his films. Whether or not people like them or not, I don't know. But I felt Mars Attacks was an interesting one because it came at a time after we'd had obviously all the Batman and the Edward Scissorhands and his Ed
period. Yeah.
And it was an interesting way for him to go, to make this kind of sort of B-movie type sci-fi rompy kind of. It's very camp. It's very.
It's very cynical. That's what I like as well.
Yeah.
It's really quite nasty in a lot of ways.
Is it Barbarella? Is that
Barbarella?
Jane Fonda.
Yeah,
it's
Jane
got
Fonda.
that aesthetic, the guns.
Oh god,
like,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
It's a very, very, very clear retro-futuristic kind of vibe to it, and it does that. There are a number of things at work here that I really like, and something that I consider watching it. They came out the same year. But this is like the anti-Independence Day because it hits so many of the same beats, and it even has the president giving the impassioned speech, and it can't be a parody of that.
Well,
but
I remember it coming out and going to see both of them in the cinema, and it did feel like you say, it was the anti that, and it was almost like Hollywood knew that we'd need a salve almost for what had come before. And it's weird because obviously there's no way that could have been planned. I don't think.
Well, it's the inverse of Independence Day in so many ways. I'm going to use a swear. I might have to bleep it, but what I really, really like about Mars Attacks is, like, in terms of complex motivations of villains, there aren't any. The Martians are just cunts, and there's no other layer because they're like these awful, spiteful little pricks who don't seem to have any agenda outside of just chaos for chaos's sake.
It's like when they try and make the monument fall on the kid, and it's just knocking it backwards and forwards trying to get them.
There's so many bits like that where it's just awful and it's hilarious. Like, it's so good. Like putting like Pierce. The bit with Pierce Brosnan's head is really grisly. Like, I put up a little tweet the other day, ironically, with the caption "RoboCop brackets 2014 director Jose Padilla," because his torso's hung up in the background and his arms and legs. If you look in that scene,
that's right,
and you're kind of too busy looking at Sarah Jessica Parker's head on a chihuahua to really, and the chihuahua's head on her later, which is completely deranged. Anyway, but what I meant to contextualise this at the top of this video, which I've sort of rambled, but anyway, those of you, quite a number of you are our age or older. There are a number who are younger. I think this has come up twice recently. If you weren't around in the 90s, the big craze was aliens and conspiracy theories, and not in the current they're turning the frogs gay conspiracy theory mold, in the kind of Area 51 you know, cover-ups, government cover-ups, Men in Black, spies. So, you know, obviously we had Men in Black, of course, which we talked about on this channel, which shares a lot with Mars Attacks. But mainly the X-Files and Dark Skies and Millennium and all that kind of stuff. And this was very much riding that wave, but again, had the wherewithal to step back and poke fun at it and go like, well, here's the ridiculous version of what were often quite, I mean, the X-Files was great, but fuck me, was it serious? You know what I mean? It was quite dour when it was often quite light, but it was quite dour. And that was the big cultural phenomena really that framed this kind of UFO obsession in the 90s. And you know, Tim Burton does have a real lightness of touch when he feels like it, and that is something that's in his work, and I think this is the one where that really comes off. Like it was very much a re-emergence of that government paranoia, conspiracy, blah blah. They're all gonna get us, man. They're all, you know, it's all that, and it's funny how that, and it did make its way over here as well. It wasn't just an American thing. I mean, it was very much over here. I don't know if that's because I don't know which, you know, whether or not we had that and it just played to that, or we just sort of soaked it up like a sponge as we're wont to do for, you know, American stuff. I'm not sure. It is weird. It was that and disaster movies, and it was all just like the Earth's going to blow up or we're going to get invaded. Is that a whole like Cold War paranoia thing that was coming out? Is that sort of being brought to a head? Yeah, maybe. I think there's a desire there to ascribe control to somebody. You know, when oddly the 90s was known as being kind of quite comfortable and sort of peacetime-ish. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to do my flies up. They're way open. I wonder who saw that. Did you see that?
I didn't even see that, and I can't even. Normally, I smell it.
It's like quavers. The 90s was generally this broadly kind of peacetime where things were generally supposed to be quite comfortable, and this is all pre 9/11 and stuff, and you know, so it's a more comfortable time. So I don't know where that came from, because I mean the last kind of few, well, now getting on for like 2 decades really, has been obsessed with zombies and superheroes, which were both things that were horrendously out of vogue in the 90s, and you wouldn't really see any of, or they would be failures outside of the Batman series.
Which is interesting, because a lot of that stuff, a lot of what Hollywood was putting out was it was superhero stuff without the superheroes. You know, it was all the action fare was ridiculous and over the top. Everything was very sort of fantasy led, albeit that it was supposed to be in the real world. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't. It's weird how unrealistic a lot of what they put out was, and yet. And then, of course, when 9/11 happened, it wasn't really acceptable to kind of say, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger can save the day or anything like that. It all felt very frivolous after that. But yeah, it is funny how the sort of zeitgeist was in that, totally obsessed with that kind of thing, and I don't know. Again, I'm not sure if it was there and they made it, or they were just feeding off it, or whether or not it was just something they wanted to put out, like it was a phase Hollywood went through, and we all kind of mapped it. I don't really know, but yeah, it's well, I mean, in bringing it back around to this film in particular, and it's got that kind of Simpsons level of cynicism. I mean, it's just ignore that bloop 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 sound. It was just a Val Verde computer. Martians and such. In terms of it's got that kind of Simpsons cynicism to it. It's not quite as funny as, say, a Simpsons thing. It's got the kind of big cast. It's very reminiscent of a kind of 70s disaster film, as is Independence Day, really. But it's got that kind of big cast of big stars. So, you know, you've got like Jack Nicholson and stuff. And there's young Natalie Portman, there's young Jack Black, but those are kind of more just there. Yeah. You got Jim Brown, you got Pam Grier. Looking at it, there is absolutely no reason for Jack Nicholson to be in it twice. Yeah, I'm really glad that he is, but there's no point in that whatsoever. I don't really get what this is, because isn't he he's an entertainer or something?
He's like sleazy Vegas businessman guy.
That's right.
Yeah,
and then he's the president, and it's like, are we saying something there? Is that you're saying that president?
And they're
is
very
that guy?
Different characters as well. Yeah, I mean, there's the one thing I noticed. So there's Paul Winfield, who is Lieutenant Traxler from The Terminator. Yes. So Paul Winfield's in it as one army general, and I can't remember the guy's name. Is it like Don Rickles is the other army general? Okay. So you've got the kind of psycho one, and you've got like the soft touch one. So there's this kind of like quite plain liberal conservative thing in it. Not going there, but that's, you know, what's going on. You've got the kind of crazy war guy and then the kind of peacenik guy, who are both in the army. And just as a little motif, like Don Rickles' guy has the mirrored aviators, whereas Paul Winfield has like transparent aviator kind of prescription glasses.
Yeah.
So you can't see the other guy's eyes, but you can see his eyes. And, you know, they are wrong, ultimately, like because they approach it all peacefully, and it all goes to shit. Yeah. And this is, again, about the Martians just being dicks. Like, they kill all those people at that first arrival, right. And then just for lols, they do it again. They just go to him, oh yeah, it was the dove, and then they order another meeting and just go fucking kill them all again. It's brilliant.
Well, and that's I mean, again, that is a beat that's in Independence Day, isn't it? The whole like, you know, we're trying to signal them, we're trying to say we're peaceful and all that, and they just get like bad, like immediately. But yeah, just played. I mean, again, it's only a hair away from. I mean, Independence Day is very funny in a lot of places. So it's only a hair. It's only just what the film is deciding is.
It's funny. They kind of like it's like there's one bit of connective tissue, and then it goes off in another direction.
Yeah, it's very odd, but they're very also very close in a lot of ways.
Well, they're both 50s B movie kind of takeoffs, and they have different tones. I mean, because those kind of little warship fighters in Independence Day and the mothership are types of flying saucer. This movie has the actual 1950s woo, and it's based on I think it's a Topps trading card series, Mars Attacks. Okay. So Mars Attacks originates from this series, which I should have looked at the era because it's 50s or 60s, and each trading card was this super cool vignette of Martians just being what I said they were. See you next Tuesdays. So like it would be like Martians flamethrower in like an army truck and stuff like that, and they've extrapolated and made it into a comedy. Right. So I believe that the Martian design carries over from those trading cards. Yeah. So it's one of those things that has a kind of basis in one thing but kind of takes off and runs with it.
Speaking of the Martians, they're quite zombie-like in a weird way. They've got that kind of they just say that all the time. I love it when there's that one in Disguise. And I found some that you can get these things that are like pedals, and they're tiered like that
to do the kind of
on wheels, and you can do that sort of. You can just go around like that and float effectively, which is quite funny. Which I'm assuming.
I love because of course the joke in that scene it's laid up earlier on that Martin Short's character is a sleazebag. Yeah. But it's basically established that he's a massive dipshit as well, because she is so obviously an alien, and he just goes with it all the way through. He's trying to kiss her and stuff, and there's a weird kind of bit of I'm glad they did it, but like she's chewing gum and he's trying to get the gum out of her mouth, and she bites his finger off and it goes in the fish. Yeah. And they even have a bit like an alien autopsy scene, because alien autopsies are crucial to that kind of mythology of aliens. And they're like, it's compressed nitrogen. He needed that to breathe. So he was and it's like a weird bit of verisimilitude in the in the kind of wacky Martian film. The photography in this is very clean. It's not a million miles away from what we're saying about Starship Troopers, where it seems to be a very kind of narrow aperture. So for the most part, everything's in focus. There's not much kind of bokeh in it. It's very kind of widescreen. I think it might be anamorphic. I'm not sure. I should have looked. I'm sorry. I like the lighting in it a lot as well. There's a lot of really nice light. It's very glossy. Yeah. And I think that adds to the high comedy, because it is an immensely expensive film, but it looks like a glossy 90s blockbuster.
I think that's partly done as well because The Martian's very bright and poppy, and I think it's probably done to try and keep them in context, but yeah, it's an example of doing that very successfully, of making an expensive film out of cheap aesthetic, effectively. Raiders is one, and Tarantino really is sort of
built a career on it, right?
Yeah, so these, I guess, are love letters. I mean, I do think Burton, certainly as he went on, was making love letters to old things that he grew up on, and I know Dark Shadows was that. That was a thing.
Putting Vincent Price in Edward Scissorhands, very telling, and he had a short called Vincent that kind of got him there. So it's.
So but I remember at the time, I don't remember how successful it was. I know I remember kind of it being part of. I don't know if it came out after Independence Day, right?
I didn't check exact dates. I kind of figured that in terms of just knowing the year, you can tell whether or not something has influenced something else. I know there's parallel developments of things and such. So don't know exact dates. They both sum up. I remember the critical reception to it being very lukewarm. Yeah. And it was a bit kind of like, oh, what's this? And I genuinely think it's sort of a bit just ahead of its time. Yeah. And really, considering what was going on then, I think people should have been a bit more receptive to it. I mean, I remember the reviews I saw being kind of like, ugh, like what's this awful tacky thing? It's like, it's an awful tacky thing. That's the point. It's supposed to be an awful. It's got Tom Jones in it. Like, what more do you want?
That's right. Yeah.
I saw you fight in Cardiff, Wales. Oh, and he can fly. He flies the plane. He's like the pilot.
Yeah. God, I haven't seen it. Like, full disclosure, I haven't actually seen it in a long time.
Also, putting Jim Brown and Pam Grier together, that's a very clear acknowledgement of the blaxploitation era.
Yeah.
Because they're two, big blaxploitation stars.
Pam follows us on Twitter.
She does.
Shout out to Pam Grier.
Yeah, I got a tweet liked by Pam because I was talking about how wicked Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey was.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
Props.
Followed by Pam. Love Pam.
We love you, Pam. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's ultimately the aliens. I don't know if they're allegorical particularly, although they are. Their sort of hubris is what gets them, isn't it? Because they're trying to. They try and kill the granny with the giant. They're just trying to sneak it up behind her.
That's what I'm talking about.
And she doesn't she knock the record player?
She listens to the. I
out?
Don't remember the guy's name, but the yodeling cowboy guy. She knocks the headphones out.
That's right. And they go, and their heads explode. Like, that's the funniest thing, is that the way to kill them is to like play this warbling.
And that in itself is really sort of a takeoff on the solution to.
Yeah,
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds, yeah.
Because, the Martians get flu. So it's kind of like, it's sort of an H.G. Wells thing going on in there, which is really cool. And and their heads just explode inside those glass bowls.
Yeah.
Which is somehow even better.
Because it's just like, bonk.
They use a shrink ray on the Don Rickles character, and they step on him like Duke Nukem. It's got this, and that's the thing as well. Like these Martians there's no kind of backstory given to them, and that's a good thing. And they're impossibly advanced. Like, they've got all this stuff. We can't hope to win. So like the nuclear bomb, he turns it into like a helium thing, I'm digressing anyway. That kind of photography in it lends itself to that disaster movie aesthetic. It feels like your kind of 1970s Towering Inferno disaster flick type thing, and it's got the kind of big cast.
Doesn't it open with like a herd of cows on fire? Is that what they're like? Their opening statement is setting fire to.
Oh my god! And I believe certain kind of shots are based on images from the trading cards.
Okay, yeah.
I believe. But that's, dude. We watched something Friday night. I can't remember what it was. It's like, oh yeah, we'll have a drink in Friday night. Watch something quite worthy. It's kind of like, we really watch that. Oh, we watched the DS9 documentary.
Oh, okay.
Which came on Prime, and it's like, we should really watch the DS9 documentary. We watched the DS9 documentary, and it was very kind of like, that was really well made and quite touching. And I was a bit like flicking through, and I saw Mars Attacks, and I was like, God damn! And I put it on, and the cow thing happened, and I was like, I forgot how much I love this film.
Right.
This film is really great. And then as soon as Pierce Brosnan turned up, that's when I text you. I was just like, don't watch Mars Attacks. Like, I forgot.
What is it? He's a professor or something, isn't he?
He's like an academic, who studies the aliens.
Yeah.
It's peaceful.
Well, we think they're peaceful. Or like, he's the sort of idiot, I suppose.
Yeah, that's his whole thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of, they're quite naive and stuff. And Michael J. Fox is in this. He gets wiped out in the first act, and there's quite a lot of that kind of stuff. Is it Joe Bob Briggs? Who's your guy from Goldeneye and who plays
Joe Don Baker?
Joe Don Baker. Joe Don Briggs is that B-movie host guy. Sorry, Joe Don Baker is in it as Jack Black's dad.
Okay.
And the other kids, I don't know. I've never seen the other kid in anything else, unless he's the kid from the Doom generation, which is what he looks like.
It's been, to be honest, that now that you've just contextualised it, it's been so long since I've seen it that it was probably at a time when I wouldn't have known that Jack Black was Jack Black. That's how long ago.
Oh, has it really been that long?
Yeah, it's been so. I mean, I've seen.
How can you review it when you haven't watched it?
Yeah. Well, I've seen it since the cinema, I think, on DVD or something. But yeah,
it's one I would catch on TV. I would always kind of flick it on and just be like, "Oh, that's great." And this is someone who Tim Burton to me, because what was it you said earlier? Like, what were you saying? Like, he's found his niche, or like he does what he does well, or whatever.
He's
making his own films.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to undermine that point. Though I am kind of going to do that.
Sorry,
but I'm not trying to undermine that point.
Yeah.
But my view of that has got to it's like if you have a chef who he makes his food, and it's like, yeah, but he just makes 100 types of lasagna, and they all have black and white stripes on, and eye makeup,
and fairground music,
which brings me nicely to Danny Elfman's score for this, because Danny Elfman has made a load of great music, and he was in Oingo Boingo, which should be enough for anyone, frankly. He is a great musician, but I feel like he fell into a niche, and I particularly feel like his collaboration with Tim Burton, because they've got like a Scorsese De Niro type affair going on.
Yeah. They did. I guess I wouldn't call it complacency, but they did sort of just do what worked a lot. But then I suppose, if you're being hired, then I'm assuming that the bigger budget stuff came in because of Batman and all that, and I'm sure there was a lot of like, do that.
Well, this film, the kind of dominant sound of 50s and 60s B was the theremin and early electronic music, because it sounded precisely. It sounded otherworldly.
You're welcome.
Yeah. You're welcome into that. But it sounded otherworldly, and that's why that worked. And Danny Elfman does that beautifully in this. It's something that's been, the kind of 50s, 60s aesthetic was really widely parodied in the 90s, and that seems to have kind of peeled off a bit. And it's what Zemeckis was doing, and it's what Joe Dante was doing, and it's to a degree what Spielberg was doing, and he did it a bit too late with Crystal Skull. It's what George Lucas was doing. They were all looking back. Well, George Lucas actually went back further because he was more in kind of the kind of 30s and 40s Flash Gordon type era and stuff. But it's all part of what we've discussed many times before. Is the 50s and 60s nostalgia coming back around in the 90s, and it plays into that. And Danny Elfman's music to this does the theremin thing really well. It does it for really great comic effect. You've got these saucers coming in with the woo. But then what I noticed with it is it really nicely, very seamlessly blends into some quite menacing sort of themes.
Right.
So when it needs to be actually quite dark, there's some quite serious film music that sort of comes off a theremin kind of go low into the mix, and then it comes back into strings and stuff like that, and it's quite menacing in places and quite dark, and which is good because it's kind of lending to that aesthetic, and it kind of builds a sort of high farce and absurdity of that situation. Well done, Danny Elfman. I'm sure you need my approval. But I thought that worked really well, and it's so important if you're going to have literal flying saucers. You need theremin music, really, if you're kind of doing that.
If you're gonna, that's one of those in for a penny, in for a pound type. You've got to just dive in with both feet. And say what you will about Tim Burton, but I do think I guess it comes down to him making the film he wants to make. But it's not. I've not found his work to be all that compromised. Whether or not you like it is another thing. But I've generally found like his, it's fair. I mean, I don't like all his stuff, but I mean, I do think he makes, he sets out and makes things. I mean, I know, having observed him and having been around him at work, he gets stuck in, and he doesn't just sit behind a monitor and stuff like that. I remember on Dark Shadows, he went around putting bits of. There's a scene where a cannery gets blown up, which is a fish place, and it blows up. Is that you?
That's next door scraping chairs. It is not my bottom.
Oh, okay.
That probably wasn't on the mic either.
You could tell.
Yeah.
He was literally going around the set with a basket full of plastic fish heads and tails and stuff, and just putting them out, and
he's very hands-on visualist.
Yeah.
And I've always said, man, he is a strong visualist. I get a bit frustrated with him using the same things over and over. But he's a strong. I think a lot of the Burton motifs are very tired.
I think the trouble, I suppose, that he's come up against is just like what he started out with your Batman and whatever. It was like Burton aesthetic on a thing, and then that kind of didn't work anymore, and it's kind of.
I think we discussed before. That's my big frustration with Batman Returns, because they really messed with Batman, didn't they? And everyone had a miserable time. And then for Batman Returns, they kind of went, do what you want, and it's kind of like, well, it's not going to have Batman in it, but it's going to have loads of fairground music and mopey black and white stripy visuals.
Yeah.
And it's like.
A character called Max Shrek.
It's so subtle. I mean, that is like if we made an action film and just called a character Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, it really is that level of unsubtle. But that plays into my broader frustrations with Tim Burton. And the funny thing is, like his Beetlejuice is really funny. Quite a lot of that's down to Michael Keaton, and Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis get to do a bunch of great deadpanning in that. Opposite that, and he's got a real lightness of touch, and a lot of stuff he does is quite comic. I mean, I didn't like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but it's in that kind of tone, and Dark Shadows as well is in that kind of tone.
Yeah, it's very comedic.
And that's essentially a takeoff of an old soap opera. So you have.
Is that 50s? I think it's
50s or 60s. Something
like
no,
that.
it's kind of. It sounds I love the difference between British soap opera and American soap opera, because American soap opera is this kind of. It's not all the way to Central American telenovela type stuff, but it's really hyperbolic and insane. And sort of like everyone's got an evil twin, and sometimes there are ghosts.
Yes.
And Dark Shadow is all about vampires and whatever. Whereas in this country, it's sort of like, oh no, well, everyone's lost their job and our son's dying of AIDS, which is essentially 90s EastEnders. Like that was very much.
Current day EastEnders. Although they seem to have embraced, not to bite the hand that
fed you.
Once for an afternoon, but they seem to have embraced the more kind of fantastic. They're like, like I got.
Well, people have come back from the dead and all sorts.
Yeah, I was involved in a storyline where like there was I misidentified.
Ben Mitchell?
Yes.
The corpse of Ben Mitchell.
Phil Mitchell's
Duncan
son.
Casey misidentified the corpse of Ben Mitchell. Yeah. Something that I had to show to my mum because she was like, "Oh, what's he doing?" And I was kind of like, "You watch EastEnders, you've seen him fucking up an autopsy or whatever." So there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a tangent on British versus Americans.
It's in
your showreel.
Yeah.
Don't go to showreel. Available now on YouTube, on the internet. Anyway, coming back round to Mars Attacks. I mean, I think this is a really great kind of one and done. I think it knows exactly what its influences are. I think it knows exactly what it's doing. I think it executes it really well. I think it's a funny script. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you could make another one.
Well, that's the beauty of it. And actually, in that sort of mid to late 90s period, there was a lot of stuff like that, where there was no, like, everything was made with, there was no, like, oh, we're doing none of this franchise bollocks. It was like, even despite the fact that there were a lot of alien invasion films or disaster films, it was like a lot of them were just one and done. Obviously, if you destroy
Independence Day for the longest time.
Yeah,
that took forever to get a sequel.
Because I forget that they made a sequel to that.
Like most people. I think they forget they made a sequel.
Possibly, yeah.
There you go.
Roland Emmerich's like, did I make...
Wait a minute.
Let me check my bank account. Oh, no, yeah. My uncle was, I don't know if
I probably wouldn't tell that story.
No, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty, but my uncle tried to sell his house. He's an estate agent. He tried to sell Roland Emmerich's house with varying degrees of success.
That is empirical fact and cannot be legally actioned.
Yes, indeed. But anyone who wants to, I tell you what, you'll probably see why he couldn't sell it if you look online. There are pictures of it online. And the decor, shall we say, was...
Baroque.
Yeah, it rhymes with Baroque. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, and it's, I mean, that my personally my favourite film, The Big Lebowski, that came out in that period as well. And there's no, they talk about sequels. I mean, I know that there's something to do with.
Well, there's the one about Jesus that is based on a French film. That,
right, but I mean, you've got that's in whatever way that's going to be.
That's very like Soldier to Blade Runner.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be quite vague as a sequel, but you know that period. But again, like not a film that was made with the idea of a sequel in mind. Like, none of it's set, not at the end of The Big Lebowski. It's not an post-credit scene where it's like, what happened to Jesus, man? And then it's like
Nick Fury comes out.
Yeah.
Well, that takes us to the end of this magnificent journey. So there you go, Mars Attacks. I really love Mars Attacks, and you might not. Why don't you tell us in the comments? We are on Patreon. There's PayPal. There's an Amazon affiliate link, which I got wrong in a video earlier in the week. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Sometimes we do live streams.
Yes. Sorry, I'm not helping you.
We make things on the internet, so that's all right, isn't it? That's nice.
Yeah, go check it out.
What a nice thing for us to. That's nice. What a nice thing for us to do,
isn't it?
Is that nice?
And we certainly really appreciate Patreons because
you're the ones that keep the lights on. We tried to not swear because YouTube kept demonetizing us, but I've kind of internally decided, fuck it. And
yeah, I mean,
YouTube isn't what keep the lights on. It's you guys throwing in your shekels. So do or don't do that. That's up to you. But we appreciate it either way. Thanks for tuning in.
Indeed.
Redbubble. There's merchandise. That's
I was going to say.
Remember. There's merchandise. There's merchandise. Stan Jason. Right, that's enough. Only less than a minute left, so we're going to hard cut to the credits. Good. Bye. Support your 7th or 8th favourite YouTube channel by buying crap, tat, junk, hogwash and filth at redbubble.com/people/Val Verde Shop. We should do a crowdfunding.
No.